hey, you look nice. So there's a habit in analytical aesthetics to take the, aesthetics part and separate it from the beauty part. And I told this to a friend who just kind of looked at me like, yeah. The thing is that if you're used to dealing with the theories, that separation is probably not weird to you, but if you're not, filthy casuals, then it is weird. It's weird. If you were to ask a random person what they thought of as aesthetic, beauty is going to be pretty integral to their answer, assuming they respond to the stranger asking them philosophical questions, and it isn't just the casuals, but some philosophers too. Aestheticians, one might say. By the way, that is such a cool word, but anyway, such as Alexander Nehamas. Behold the boy. He doesn't like that separation for a very similar reason to my friend. It's kind of unintuitive from the way we actually engage with art. Now, that doesn't mean aesthetics or beauty is just about whatever we think looks good. It still has standards, and, like all our favorite things, nuance. But the standards are from applied and practiced engagement, not theoretical purity. They're not very strict or particularly analytical. They're more about describing the way we, as human people, naturally engage with the aesthetic realm. Yeah, you lose out on the specificity of more stringent concepts, and sure, you don't get the closure of the exact definition of beauty, but to Nehamas, that risk is a part of life. It's inextricable. It's a necessary concession to keep honest engagement, and while there's definitely value to those more analytical approaches, to Nehamas, we shouldn't let that get in the way of the natural human experience of art. It's valuable and intuitively powerful, and there's no good reason to obscure that. So, we have a practical, everyday concept of aesthetic engagement, but it's still kind of in a vacuum, cause even if you're an art person who does art things, that's not really how you're going to engage with art objects, at least not most often. There's one big factor. Do you know what it is? You're never gonna guess. It's capitalism. It's always capitalism. So here's the thing. Aesthetic engagement, being a natural part of the human being's being, is also a pretty good way to engage people, cause, no shit. Thing shiny, thing pretty, me want thing, or at least to engage with thing. Given that the trade of things is how we distribute, everything, that means that even a purely aesthetic thing is still in the context of the market, and you are not put in the role of a person with the intention to fulfill you as a person, but in the role of a consumer to fulfill your function as a consumer. Now, does that mean aesthetic things in a market aren't aesthetic anymore? Not at all. But, as Yuriko Saito notes, the thing isn't really the whole picture. Take, for example, a shirt from, old Targshul's. The shirt is a material thing, made of matter, and yeah, you get it. That, of course, means that it has to be made, kind of like how a painting has to be, painted. At first glance, okay, what of it? It exists. Crazy. In reality, though, that means the context in which it's made is an essential component of the thing. If, for example, somebody painted a painting with lovely reds, but the reds were made from the blood of corgis, that's what we call a big oof. Whether that affects your aesthetic evaluation is up for debate, but whether that affects how you interact with it in totality is not. Similarly, the shirt which requires destructive cotton farming or mandates waste wreaking havoc on the environment can still look nice, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's material. There isn't an alternate version. There isn't such a thing as that shirt without that cost. It's inextricable. To Saito, you don't get the luxury of ignoring reality, especially because markets, unlike the choices of a painter, aren't personal, they're structural. You could arrest the corgi killer and hope that solves the problem. You can't exactly arrest market incentives. You, as a person, naturally engage with aesthetic objects in an essential way. You, as a consumer, don't have the ability to define your mode of engagement. You engage with what's given to you. Your relationship with art is no longer a person-art relationship, it's a consumer-product relationship. And while the function might be similar to some extent, the intentions and the control are not. Is it your fault? No, but it does require your participation, and for things like, let's say, your favorite color. Ew, really? Anyway, for something like a favorite color, it doesn't really matter if you don't understand it or if it's not grounded, because, it's not reasonable. Not that you can't have a reasonable color choice in the everyday use of the word, but it doesn't have to do with reason. It doesn't have to do with being substantive. Something like the market, though, that isn't so simple. Yeah, you are trapped and you don't really get much of a say in how your aesthetic engagement is manufactured, but you do have a say in what you believe and expect of it. If you understand and accept it, then yeah, it kind of is your fault. If you choose not to understand it, also kind of your fault. Sorry, I know some people like that loophole. So, what then? Well, we aren't incapable of doing stuff. We're people. We have brains and thoughts, unfortunately. But that does mean that we can understand when stuff is, well, bad. It's not as if things improve just because we know they should, but knowing they should is necessary to get them to improve. Baby steps, you can't really fix something you can't identify. For Nehamas, that honest engagement is intrinsically valuable, and it is how we engage in a vacuum. But as noted by Saito, we don't have the luxury of untainted engagement. And hey, I agree with Saito. In fact, more than Saito does. Well, not really, that's not how agreement works. But I say that because I don't think it stops there. She's right. You're siloed into this form of aesthetic engagement whether you want it or not. You don't get a choice. You don't, at least in the present, really get a say, and you don't get to ignore it. But I think the consequences are more personal than where she leaves it. It isn't just about tainted participation and ethical externalities, not just about weighing the cost of your aesthetic engagement. You're robbed of your capacity for honest aesthetic engagement. And yeah, I'm not going to pretend that the externalities are less important than your capacity for honest aesthetic engagement, but that's kind of the issue. That extreme cost is for something that makes you worse off, or at least doesn't give you the chance to really know. It's not an exchange so much as it's just loss. While I do think Nehamas is right in saying honest engagement is valuable, and that Saito is right in saying that we need to apply our knowledge for better practices, I think that in the same way Nehamas was stuck in the vacuum, Saito is too. Whether we have a duty for anything isn't really the focus here, but if something is intrinsically valuable, and we should act in accordance with our best conceptions, maybe we should put people first. Maybe, instead of just applying band-aids to obviously broken parts of our system, the incentive of our systems should be us. Maybe, if there is such a thing as intrinsic value to the human experience, we shouldn't just protect it, but prioritize it. Just maybe, there are things worth putting first, and protecting old guitar shells isn't it.